From the back of the class to a Grammy winner, how he turned hate into hits. Before we get into the story, drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from today? Greenwood, Georgia, a small, dusty town that felt like time had passed it by. Life there didn't twist or turn. It just trudged forward like it was following a tired old script. The streets smelled like corn and motor oil, and nobody talked about dreams, only about how fast they could pay off the loan on their aging pickup trucks. This was where Ellis Johnson went to high school, Greenwood High, school number 14, a place where everything ran like clockwork. Morning prayer, first bell, pop quiz, lunch break, another bell, then the bus ride home. Same routine, every single day, like one of those old black and white TVs that nobody watches anymore, but nobody throws out either. Just collecting dust in the corner, because that's what it's always done. Ellis was the kid no one noticed until they needed someone to laugh at. Tall for his age, awkwardly thin, dark-skinned in a school that was mostly white, big ears, clumsy hands, a gap between his front teeth that turned into a punchline more often than not. But what made him stand out the most was his clothes. Hand-me-down shirts from cousins, pants that stopped just shy of his ankles, and cracked, worn-out shoes that gave him away before he even spoke. It didn't just say poor, it painted a target on his back. His classmates didn't beat on him every day, mostly because they didn't have to. He didn't fight back. He just waited for it all to pass. Dummy, dirty number, mock rap moves and fake accents. This was his daily soundtrack. Some days he'd hide under the bleachers in the locker room just to avoid the noise. Other days he'd stare at his reflection in the hallway window and quietly ask himself why it never seemed to end. He never found an answer. Music was his hiding place. A beat-up cassette player his mom gave him was the only thing he could call a friend. The songs he recorded off the radio felt like magic. They didn't just play, they spoke to him. That's when he started writing, not poems, not rhymes, just thoughts, feelings, pages and pages filled up in a battered old notebook labeled 7th grade English, tucked deep in the bottom of his backpack, wrapped in a faded t-shirt. The day everything shifted, Ellis was alone in the locker room, sitting in the corner. His lip was split, blood dried down his chin, his knee throbbing from a hit earlier. The notebook rested on his lap, and he kept writing, even though his hand was shaking. He couldn't stop. That's when the door creaked open, and in walked Mr. Danvers, the music teacher. Late 50s, slight belly, always carried a coffee mug like it was part of his arm. He wasn't anyone's favorite, but he was the only adult who didn't look at Ellis like he was a problem to be solved. He didn't ask about the blood, he just sat beside him, waited for Ellis to finish writing, and said quietly, "So what are you scribbling in there all the time? Algebra formulas?" Ellis didn't say a word, but Mr. Danvers didn't press. Instead, he got up, walked over to the upright piano in the corner, lifted the lid and played a few simple notes, a soft melody. Then he turned and asked, "Want to give it a shot?" No pressure, no explanation, just a challenge. Ellis didn't know how to read music. He'd never touched a piano, but he stood, walked over, placed his fingers on the keys, and, note by note, played the melody back, almost perfectly. Danvers gave a single nod, no smile, just respect. After that, things started to shift. Once a week, Mr. Danvers invited Ellis to the music room. He'd play jazz, blues, soul. Sometimes he'd hit a weird chord and ask Ellis to find it by ear. Ellis usually could. Not always on the first try, but better every week. He wasn't a prodigy, but he was relentless, and Danvers respected that. Meanwhile, school didn't change. Kids still joked. One day, someone shoved Ellis on the stairs. Another day, his notebook got passed around. Someone read one of his lines out loud. "Mama scrubs someone else's floors. I dream of writing heaven in sound." And the room burst out laughing. At first loud, then quieter, when he didn't flinch. Didn't run. He just sat still, staring forward like he was somewhere else entirely. His mom, Rosa Johnson, didn't know much about what was going on. She came home late, reeking of bleach and too tired to lift her eyes. She cooked simple food and asked the same question every night. "Everything good at school?" Without really expecting an answer. They didn't talk about pain. She didn't know how, and he didn't want to add to hers. But one night, while washing his shirt, she found the notebook. She couldn't read English fluently, but she saw the word mama. She read the line and froze, then gently placed the notebook back and didn't say a thing. The next morning, there were 2 sandwiches on the counter instead of 1. Nothing else changed. But Ellis noticed. That spring, Mr. Danvers pushed him to perform at the school concert. It felt like a terrible idea. He knew exactly how it would go, but he showed up anyway, in jeans that didn't fit and a shirt ironed within an inch of its life. He sat at the piano and played his first song. It was about rain and the noise inside his head. The auditorium was dead silent. Then someone snickered, but Mr. Danvers clapped. And that was enough for Ellis to realize. He wasn't just playing, he was speaking. And if you speak long enough, eventually someone listens. That's how the first act of his childhood ended. Not with applause, not with a win, but with a step. The kind a child takes without knowing how far they'll have to walk. Years passed. Grainwood faded in the rear view, like an old page full of silence and pain. Ellis Johnson wasn't that skinny kid in the too big shirt anymore. He was stocking shelves at a supermarket on the edge of Atlanta. Woke up at 6, walked almost a mile to catch the bus, came home to a rented room with no curtains, dust in the corners, sweat in the walls, peeling paint. On the windowsill sat his old cassette player and his notebook. The dream of becoming a musician hadn't died. It just stepped back so survival could take the lead. But every night, while his neighbors yelled through thin walls or watched TV too loud, Ellis slipped on his headphones and listened. He wrote, sometimes music, usually words. He didn't believe anyone would ever hear them, but he couldn't stop writing. By day, he moved boxes, minimum wage, $5 a day for food, and just enough sleep to keep going. His skin still stood out in the crowd, and his soft southern drawl gave him away before he even said where he was from. He knew the drill. Nobody looked twice when he applied for a real job. To them, he was background noise, a mover, a helper, someone who'd carry the load and disappear. People behind the counter never glanced at the name on his badge, never noticed the way he hummed to himself while lining up bottles of water on the shelf. But he sang, softly, quiet enough to stay invisible, but with a heart that didn't know how to lie. At night, he played dive bars and dusty diners, the kinds of places where no one really watched the stage. Drunken laughter, the clatter of plates, the occasional shout, "Play something we know!" And Ellis, without a word, would slide into a cover just to keep the peace. But sometimes, when the moment felt right, he'd place his notebook on the stool, close his eyes, and sing one of his own. In those moments, he disappeared into the song. Not a single label ever called back. He mailed out demo CDs burned on a second-hand recorder to any studio he could find an address for. The silence was predictable. When they did respond, it was always the same. Not enough material, not enough charisma, doesn't fit the mold. One producer didn't sugarcoat it. You don't look like an artist. No image, no spark, nothing to sell. The voice is there, but it won't move product. That's when Ellis realized they weren't looking for music. They were looking for packaging. One night, he was playing to 5 people in a nearly empty bar, tucked into the edge of an old industrial strip. The place was called Margot's. The floors were sticky, the lights dim and flickering, and the air smelled like burnt grease and spilled beer. 3 tired tourists sat at the bar. A pair of mechanics from the auto shop next door were hunched over whiskey, and an older woman nursed a soda in the corner, just there for the quiet. He played a few covers. No one looked up. Then he started into one of his own, The Light Inside, a song about his mother, the dim hallways of his childhood, and the kind of pain you can't quite put into words. He didn't notice when the room quieted. One of the tourists leaned in like he was trying to catch every syllable. The woman in the corner closed her eyes. When the song ended, there was silence, then a single clap, then another. No applause break, just acknowledgement. After the set, a broad-shouldered man in a beat-up leather jacket walked up. "You write your own stuff?" Ellis nodded. "You want to play it at my bar?" He didn't get excited. He'd been let down too many times. But the guy handed him a business card anyway. Walter Kane, owner, Central Roof Jazz Club, New Orleans. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a miracle. It was a maybe. Ellis didn't have money for the trip, but he sold his old tape deck, asked for an advance at work, and borrowed from his neighbor, the one he helped with groceries every now and then. He rode buses for almost a full day, no plan, just a notebook full of songs and a worn-out dream. New Orleans hit him like a wave. Hot air, street noise, and music pouring from open windows like water from a broken pipe. Kane was blunt, but not unkind. He pointed Ellis toward a tiny room above the club, mold on the walls, a bed that creaked like it might collapse, one chair. "If the dirt doesn't scare you, you can stay. First gig's Friday." Ellis wasn't scared. He'd already seen worse. He didn't come looking for a break. He just wanted someone to hear him. The air in the French Quarter was thick with the smell of fried meat, damp bricks, and sun-warmed wood. Clotheslines stretched between crumbling balconies, and street performers played like their lives depended on it. Ellis walked the cracked sidewalk, his beat-up notebook clutched tight under his arm. Inside, his life. Lyrics, half-formed melodies, unfinished thoughts. Tucked between the pages, his bus ticket stub and Kane's creased card. The bar sat between a greasy diner and an auto garage. The sign was half busted, the lights inside flickered, and the front door creaked like a smoker with bad lungs. When Ellis stepped inside, the musty smell hit him first. The floorboards were uneven. There were maybe 5 tables in the whole place. The stage looked more like a shipping pallet on bricks. But the speaker by the wall was solid, and the upright piano, though scratched to hell, still had soul when someone touched it right. The room above the bar wasn't much more than 4 walls and a mattress on the floor, a chipped nightstand, a window that stared straight into a brick wall. In the corner, an old mop bucket, no heater, no AC, but Ellis didn't care. He knew something was beginning here, something real. He laid his notebook on the sill and started writing. The first few days passed in silence. He swept the floors, carried booze deliveries, cleaned up after drunks. Kane never asked when he'd start playing, just said once in that low, scratchy voice of his, "Don't rush it. This crowd's got no time for fake." Each night, Ellis sat in the corner and listened. Local players hit the stage. Some were raw, some were sloppy, but none of them were empty. There was one trumpeter, Larry, who looked like he'd been carved out of leather and bone. He played like he was arguing with God. Larry was the first to talk to him, not much. Just walked by after a set and said, "Don't keep music in your head too long. It don't live there." Soon they started jamming. Larry brought out a beat-up guitar, placed it gently in Ellis's lap, and waited. Ellis strummed until his fingers warmed. He sang low and Larry joined in, almost like whispering. That's how the nights went. Hot air, sweaty room, 2 men sharing sounds softer than sleep, the kind of peace you can't buy. Then one night Larry didn't show up. His heart had finally given out. No announcement, no tribute. The bar rolled on, but Ellis sat there long after close, cradling the same guitar in his lap. Walter came over and rested a hand on his shoulder. "Take it," he said. "He'd want you to." It was the first Friday of fall. For the first time, Ellis took the stage not as a fill-in or background player, but as the headliner. The crowd was small, 3 regulars nursing beers, 2 couples from nearby apartments, and an older couple who probably just wandered in. He wore a plain button-up and held Larry's old guitar. His hands trembled. So did his voice, but he didn't stop. His first song was about a room with no windows, and the kind of silence where real things are born. The bar went still, no glasses clinking, no small talk, just him and that voice. When the last note fell, one of the women near the front whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Who is he? Why haven't we heard him before?" Afterward, Walter poured Ellis a glass of water without saying a word. Then he gave a nod. "Next time, there'll be more people. Just don't change a damn thing. If you start lying to them, they'll hear it right away." And people did start noticing. New faces showed up on Fridays. His songs were quiet, whispers really, but every chord felt like it mattered. Every lyric had been lived. He didn't try to win anyone over. He just sang the way he felt it. Then came the offers, record labels, managers, the kind of people who speak in contracts and radio edits. "We need hits. We'll set you up with a producer. We've got writers if you need help with the lyrics. Your image could use some work. Let's talk branding." They didn't hear what the folks in the bar heard. They only noticed the silence between the lines and didn't know what to do with it. "You don't fit any box," one exec said. "You're not hip-hop, not soul, not pop. Who's going to buy this?" Ellis would just shrug. "I sing what I feel. If you can't hear it, maybe it's not for you." So once again, he was on his own. No label, no backup plan. Just him, Larry's guitar, and a bar with 5 tables and a Friday night slot. And for now, that was enough. 4 months went by, and Ellis stopped keeping count of the Fridays. The bar was never packed, but people started coming back, week after week. Some brought friends, some came alone, some stayed after shows just to shake his hand. Others listened in silence, then left without a word. Walter noticed but never said much. He believed in letting things grow on their own. If the music worked, it worked. If not, no marketing plan could save it. Then one Monday morning, Ellis bent down to grab his shoes and spotted an envelope under the door. Cream-colored, no return address. Just his name, in a tidy script, Ellis Johnson. Inside was a business card, Raymond Fields, Creative Director, Field Tone Agency, Los Angeles. The letter was short. Fields wrote that he'd been at the bar 2 weeks earlier, by chance invited by a friend. He sat at the back and listened to the whole set, and what he heard stuck with him. "You don't sing for the stage," the note read. "You sing for the person inside each of us. Nobody does that anymore. If you're interested, I'd like to bring you to LA to record. No contracts, no pressure. We'll cover housing and studio time. The rest is up to you." Ellis read the letter 3 times. At first, he didn't believe it. Then came something deeper than excitement. Fear. He'd never been beyond Louisiana. LA felt like another planet. The idea of going there almost felt violent, like being pulled out of his own skin. Walter listened quietly as Ellis told him. Then he said just one thing. "If you go, don't change a word. And if you stay, don't change a word. People don't listen because you're nearby. They listen because you're real." 2 days later, Ellis sent his reply. A week after that, he had a ticket. He didn't pack much. Larry's guitar, a worn-out notebook full of songs, a couple shirts, and a clean pair of sneakers. He left the room above the bar just as it was. Bucket in the corner, cracked mirror, dusty air. He didn't want to forget where it all began. LA greeted him with dry heat, loud traffic, and a strange kind of urgency. As if everyone was running late, but no one knew where they were headed. The studio Field Tone had rented was the real deal. No blown-out speakers, no busted mics, just clean sound and real instruments. The team came together quickly. A sound engineer, a pianist, a drummer. They were respectful, but cautious. None of them knew what to expect from this skinny guy in a faded denim jacket. For the first session, Ellis asked them to turn off all the lights, except for a single lamp on the mixing desk. He sat in the corner, guitar on his lap, a draft slipping across the floor. He started singing, barely parting his lips. And in the headphones, it sounded like his voice came from the inside of your chest. No one breathed. When the take ended, Raymond just nodded. Don't touch it. Not a thing. That's done. They recorded the album with almost no retakes. Ellis refused overdubs, no reverb, no sweetening, just the songs. Simple structure, no filler. But every one of them carried a story, and everyone had a face. The release was pushed to spring to sort out the paperwork. Ellis signed the contract without a manager and insisted on one clause. No outside writers. Only his words. Only his voice. The first reviews trickled out quietly, small blogs, niche music sites, but then came bigger names. No one called him the next big thing, but they said this: he sings like he's the only one in the room, and you are too. One critic wrote, "This is for anyone who's ever sat in silence and didn't know how to fill it." His name wasn't on billboards, his face wasn't on magazine covers, but people were listening, really listening. Not because it was trendy, but because something in those songs felt true, familiar, and a little broken in a way that made you feel less alone. Ellis stayed close to the studio. He didn't do interviews, didn't hit the parties. Rented a small apartment in Lemire Park, among old houses, laundromats, and corner stores. Each morning he drank his coffee black, spun old Bill Withers records, and wrote. He was afraid of only one thing: losing the voice that sang inside him. Every night he'd sit down, close his eyes, and check to see if it was still there. And it was, growing louder. By the winter of 2009, Ellis had learned the real shape of recognition. It didn't crash in like a wave, didn't blow the doors off all at once. No, it crept in, like water under a door, cold, quiet, barely noticeable, until suddenly you're ankle deep in something new, and there's no going back. The tour, the album, a second record, interviews, bigger stages, brighter lights. He played in cities he'd only ever seen on maps: Chicago, Austin, San Francisco, and almost every time he asked them to dim the spotlights. He never got used to the faces staring back, hoping to see something great. He just sang, some nights better than others, but always honest, and that, it turned out, was enough. When the letter came about the Grammy nominations, he thought it was a joke, some mistake. He checked websites, waited for the correction, but it never came. Name: Ellis Johnson, category, Best New Artist. Then, Album of the Year, and then, Best Songwriting. He was in the kitchen when he opened it, and when the letter fell from his hand, so did the notebook full of new lyrics. He just sat there staring at the table. No smile, no tears, not even joy. Just disbelief. Why me? The kid they used to call quiet black boy in school? The one who never showed his teeth when he laughed because he hated his smile. Why now? Back in Grainwood, news traveled fast. The local paper ran a front-page story: Our Ellis, almost a legend. At the laundromat where his mother, Rosa, still worked, customers started leaving notes by the register. You raised a real one. She kept them in a drawer under the counter and read them at night, quietly to herself. But it wasn't the nominations that made her proud. It was the phone calls. Every night without fail. Did you eat today? Your back still hurting? Need me to send anything? One of Ellis's old school bullies, Owen Brower, had become a music columnist. When the nominations went public, he published a piece titled, When Silence Beats Noise, Listeners Lose. In it, he called Ellis a charming but forgettable face of the new outsider trend, adding, talent isn't just sincerity, it's scale. Johnson sings like he's afraid of becoming great. Ellis read the article, felt nothing, no anger, no pain. He just turned the page. He knew who wrote it, and he knew why. Sometimes people just need to believe the world didn't make a mistake when it passed them over. The night of the Grammys was unusually cold for California. Ellis wore a navy blue tuxedo, slightly too big in the shoulders. He hadn't had time to tailor it. His front tooth gap? Still there. No veneers, no polish, just him, no date, no publicist, just his mother. Rosa wore a simple knee-length dress she'd sewn herself with a white collar. When they stepped onto the red carpet, one of the security guards tried to escort her off, thinking she'd wandered in by accident. She showed him her pass. Didn't say a word. Ellis's performance was set for late in the show. He chose the song himself, not the hit from the album, not what they expected. He sang Windows Without Glass, a quiet track that never made it to radio. It was about his childhood, about their drafty house, about winters so cold he had to stuff pillows into broken window frames because his mom couldn't afford thick curtains. It was just him and a guitar. No effects, no tricks, just his voice. The room went still. Not a single phone screen glowed. Not a single whisper. When the last note faded, one person stood, then another, then the whole damn room. He won. He walked to the stage, took the statue in his hands and looked at it like it didn't belong to him. Then he said just 2 sentences. "Thank you for not turning away when it got quiet. I still don't know how loud you have to be heard, but I guess tonight, this was enough." After the ceremony, he didn't go to the after parties. He and his mom went back to the apartment, ordered takeout, and ate off plastic plates. She looked at him across the couch and said softly, "You know they're all going to listen now." He smiled. "Good, but I hope they're not just listening to me. I hope they're listening to the quiet ones too." That night, sleep didn't come easy. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to remember where it all began. But his memory blurred. All he could feel was the echo of that locker room, the one that smelled like sweat and dust, where someone once tore up his notebook and laughed. And still, through all of it, there was a voice inside him, still singing, through time, through pain, through everyone who never listened. 2 years passed since the night the world finally heard Ellis Johnson. But fame wasn't what people said it would be. It didn't bring peace. It didn't heal old wounds. It just was, like a shadow on the wall, always behind you, never yours. He learned quickly that he didn't want to live in that noise. No ad campaigns, no magazine spreads, no saying nothing in interviews that said everything. He turned down 3 major deals, skipped 3 award shows, and vanished from headlines. Some said he burned out. Others swore he joined a cult. But the truth was simpler. He just didn't want to waste his voice on things that didn't matter. He bought a small house on the edge of Los Angeles. The porch leaned, the yard needed work, but the basement was big enough for an old upright piano and a makeshift studio. That's where he lived. That's where he wrote. Recorded albums he never released. Taught online voice lessons. Sometimes played free shows in rough neighborhoods. Sometimes just walked the city in a hoodie, head down. And in those walks, he found the rhythm again. The one from childhood. The one that saved him when there was nothing else. A year after the Grammys, he opened his first music school. A modest space in Bancroft Park, the same neighborhood where the library once wouldn't let him in. The sign on the door was simple, a school where it's okay to mess up. He drove there himself each week, brought in old guitars, beat-up mics he used back in the day. His students, kids from immigrant families, boys off the street, girls turned away from school choirs. He wasn't trying to make stars. He just taught them how to listen, to themselves, to each other, to the silence between the notes. Ellis didn't allow journalists anywhere near the school. Officially, it was just a charitable program backed by an unnamed foundation. Only a few former students had guessed the truth, and even they rarely asked him about it directly. He didn't encourage admiration. He didn't tolerate imitation. He always said, "You're not supposed to sound like me. You're supposed to sound like you." By that time, Rosa Johnson had retired. After the Grammys, she sold their old house in Grainwood and moved closer to her son. She had her own place, but she spent a lot of time at the school, cooking for the kids, sewing curtains, patching up torn notebooks. Once a student asked her, "Is it true you're his mom?" She smiled, nodded, and said, "It's true, but he belongs to you a little bit now, too." Meanwhile, Owen Brower kept writing his column. His voice had gotten sharper, meaner even, but also more popular. He still held his ground. Ellis was a fluke, a flash in the pan, overrated. But as time passed, fewer people cared. Because Ellis's songs didn't fade. People covered them, quoted them, played them at weddings and hospitals, places where music wasn't just entertainment, but something to hold on to. His voice had become something else, a voice for those who never had one. One day during a closed workshop, a teenage boy came up to him, tall, skinny, with nervous eyes, and asked Ellis to listen to his demo. He played it. There was no rhythm, no technique, just a raspy voice and one rough verse, but it carried pain, real pain. Ellis stopped the track and said, "You haven't learned how to sing yet, but you already know how to speak. That matters more." That boy went on to become one of the school's first graduates. He made a record, and when he accepted his first award, he said, "I wouldn't be alive if he hadn't heard me." Over time, more schools opened, in Detroit, in Houston, in Atlanta. Ellis wasn't physically present at all of them, but he was part of everyone. He recorded video messages, picked teachers himself, funded what he could. But he kept a low profile. He almost never spoke to the media. Photos of him were rare, and somehow that made his name ring louder, because it echoed in actions, not headlines. In one of the rare interviews he did agree to, on a local radio show, the host asked him, "How did you get through it when no one believed in you?" Ellis was quiet for nearly a full minute. Then he said, "I sang for the one inside. That one always believed, and if he can hear me, then I know I'm alive." That quote ended up on the wall of one of the schools. But for the students, it became more than words. It became a way to live, a way to survive. Ellis Johnson wasn't a star anymore. He had become something else, an echo that wouldn't fade. And in that echo, everyone heard something different, but everyone felt heard. He was the one who taught us not to fear silence, a silence that once sounded like failure, but slowly, day by day, turned into a sound of its own, the sound of believing in yourself. Ellis didn't become the person the world expected him to be. He became who he always was, in spite of the laughter, in spite of the doubt. And because he never let silence swallow his voice, his songs still play in people's hearts all over the world. Quiet, yet impossibly loud. Loud not for everyone, but for the ones who really listen. And maybe you know what that feels like. When the world tells you to quit, when they laugh at your dreams, when everything says you're not enough. Maybe you've asked yourself, is it even worth trying? Ellis showed us something powerful. You don't need permission to matter. You don't need to fit into anyone else's mold. You matter simply because you're you. So believe in yourself. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to be understood by everyone. You don't need a standing ovation to know your life matters. You just need to stay true to your voice, to your heart, to your path. Even if that path feels invisible at first, even if no one seems to notice, keep singing your song, even if the world's not ready for it yet. Time has a way of catching up. Don't give up. Sing for yourself, because somewhere out there, someone will hear you. And if this story touched something in you, if it lit even the smallest spark, don't forget to follow this channel. We've got more stories like this, stories that might inspire you, make you think, or remind you that you're not alone. Share this with someone who needs it. Let's keep building something real together. Believe, listen, and don't give up. You're capable of more than you know.